What's up, guys? Welcome to another session on the podcast. Today, I have Destiny Afu, with whom I will be discussing capitalism and socialism in Africa. Welcome to the show, Destiny.
Thank you for having me, man. Thank you a lot for having me. I'm looking forward to a fruitful conversation with you.
Yeah, we should have done this like 2 weeks earlier, but due to um, schedules that's clashing and
Mhm.
also due to network issues. But here we are today.
Yeah.
All right, please introduce yourself to my viewers.
Okay. My name is Destiny Afu, and I'm the founder of the Afu Foundation. I mainly work in issues based on governance, leadership, international relations, and international development.
All right. So you are from Cameroon. Could you give us a background on what the economy of Cameroon is like?
Okay. Thank you for that question, man. I just want to say Cameroon is a middle, no, it's a lower, so should I say, lower middle income, economy. And it's, should I say, it's a mixed economic system in which we have a play of government regulations and free enterprise. So generally, that is the background. Generally, that's the background of the Cameroon economy. Cameroon economy is the largest in the SAMAC region. SAMAC region, that's the Economic Commission of Central Africa. We have Gabon, we have Chad, we have Equatorial Guinea, we have Cameroon, and we have the Central African Republic. So Cameroon economy is the largest in it, and we have a GDP of $54.43 billion. That's the general background of the Cameroon economy.
Interesting. Now, I'm also aware that for some years now, there's a conflict going on between the English-speaking side and the French-speaking side. Now, is it okay
Yes.
for me to describe it as a civil war?
No, it's not a civil war. It's
Oh,
it's
okay.
definitely not a civil war. It's definitely not a civil war. Should I say it's more like, and should I say, how do I'm trying to find the right word to use. It's more like a grievance, shall I say? It's more like a grievance. Anglophones think they are marginalizing a lot of things, so they decided to raise up the point, and before they knew that they took up arms, which is not, shall I say, because if you want to compare the fighting spirit of the guys who took up arms against the government, it has no match. So I shouldn't say it's a civil war. It's not yet a civil war, but if it dragged long enough, it's going to be. It's going to be, though they are not sign there are no signs of that, because actually calm is actually returning. And well, actually, where I am now, I am in an Anglophone region, and today Monday, it's a routine ghost town everywhere, but things are getting better, in which you can see some movement around.
Interesting. How long has this conflict been on?
Yeah, this has been since 2016. I'll just give you a rundown of it. It started in 2016. It didn't start as a conflict like this, as you know it. Okay. Now, first of all, Cameroon got independence. The English side the French side got independence first. Then the English side came in, and the question that was asked was, "Are you willing to join? Are you willing to gain independence to join Nigeria?" That was British administered Nigeria, or you want to gain independence by joining the French Republic of Cameroon. So the question was asked, like, since 1961. So there was a system of government, it was the federal system, which was put in place, but was abolished under the Ahijo regime. So that's basically the general cause of this conflict. But for the conflict, it has been since 2016. It started just like as a strike action of teachers and lawyers who were expressing grievances on English system being marginalized in the general Cameroon system. And before we knew it, people came in and said they wanted independence now. So that's how it started. It's been since 2016, but the worst years were 2017, 18, and 19. I mean, that was the worst years. Those were the
Hmm,
worst years of it.
interesting. Would you say the government has been able to manage the conflict well, or perhaps the conflict has been able to drag on for so long perhaps because of government's ineptitude in handling the situation?
Yes, exactly. That's the case. The one thing about the government is they don't want to play. They don't want to play uh, like a negotiator. They call these guys terrorists, so they don't want to have anything to negotiate with them. And they don't want a situation where they will see like the government is being too weak, you know, and too substandard to go down to the level to negotiate with people who have grievances based on, you know, uh, marginalization issues. That's what the government is doing. And so what they do is they just militarize the whole place, and their hope is, those who are fighting against them are going to tire out. Maybe their finances are going to tire out with time, are going to wear out with time, and the conflict is going to end. That's the general ideology of it. And even when a grand national dialogue was called, it wasn't like a dialogue; it was just like a monologue. The government just came in and stated what they wanted,
Hmm.
and then that's it. And they called it the grand national dialogue. But when you say dialogue, you have to get people involved, like opposing parties involved in a dialogue, and you hear their opinions and you try to resolve between them. But it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. So the government is just trying to play like the winner over it. They are trying to impose their winning strategy over it, so they don't appear weak or incapable or something of handling the conflict like that. And even the international community knows, they have been able to make the international community know that it's just an internal grievance in which they are handling. And so you don't have it on coverage like the conflict in Sudan or the conflict in Yemen or all the others. So that's what they have been doing.
Most African countries are no stranger to internal conflict. In Nigeria, we certainly have our own fair share of that. I remember we've had conflict as regards to oil. We've had conflict as regards to resources and what have you. So, Cameroon, I guess, is not an exception to that. But I want to ask you, in what ways has this conflict affected the economy of Cameroon? I assume it
Oh,
has affected it in some ways.
yes, a lot. Like I just it's been immense. It's been immense.
Mm.
At the start of this year, the president of the republic actually announced that they were going to stop subsidizing some certain products like petroleum products in Cameroon were being subsidized a lot, and they had to increase a lot of taxes. A lot of taxes. I mean, price hikes in Cameroon have gone up like 20% from what they used to be. And I know it is as a result of the war, which has caused strain on the economy. And so the government is trying to get finances, to cope with their development agendas. And a lot of our development agendas have been held up just because of the crisis. Just a lot of it has been held up because of the crisis of these past years. And so the government is trying to raise money to see how they can follow their development agenda and, still fund, their fight against the conflict. That's really what has been going on, and it's affected a lot of people. Like I told you, Mondays in every English region is what they call a ghost town, and offices are closed, businesses are closed, just nothing. Just imagine it's a Monday, beginning of the week, and
Mm.
everywhere is closed. Where you're supposed to have businesses turning around, there's nothing. So in Cameroon now, in English Cameroon, we actually have 3 days a weekend. It's
Mm.
funny, right? Yeah, 3 days a
There.
weekend, and Mondays is the worst. Yeah, no business activity, and what that's stopping.
I certainly hope that things get better for the English-speaking side and for Cameroon in general. But let's talk about
Okay.
Africa, though. Africa is a continent of 54 countries. And of course, Africa also houses perhaps the largest um, poverty population in the world. Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, as you may know. So, do you think the poverty we are experiencing in Africa is a consequence of failed economic system? And if so, which economic system do you think Africa should adopt? Should Africa adopt a more socialist system or a more capitalistic system or something of a mix of both?
Okay. Now I will say this: the poverty in Africa is not because of capitalism or socialism or communism or the system, as you say. It's because of the leadership, and the leadership has not yet put in place institutions, which can require any of this system, either capitalist or socialist or communist, to operate well. The leadership has not yet put in place those kind of systems. So I think basically it's the leadership. Now, I just want to sound this distinction so we have a clear understanding between what we call capitalism and socialism and communism. Capitalism simply means an economy where resources and means of production are simply run by private individuals. And socialism, it's an economic system where, they consider that resources and means of production are run by, the community, the people, through their government. And communism, on the other hand, is where the government has total charge over resources and means of production. Yes, yeah, so that's it. Now, I want to say this. The different thing is we should not base our economies or our successes on labels, okay? To say an economy is going to succeed when it's socialist or a communist or capitalist, I think it's the wrong thing to do, because I've seen communist economies do well. I've seen capitalist economies do well. I've seen socialist economies do well. And if Africa has to succeed, if nations have to succeed in Africa, you look at the realities of your people. You look at what they are facing. You look at the income level of your people, and you know what system to put in place and the institutions to back those systems up. That is what is going to make it succeed. So capitalism can succeed in Africa, yes. Socialism can succeed in Africa, yes. And communism, dare I say, yeah, it can succeed in Africa if there are the right systems in place. I'll take an example from a nation like China. China system is, should I say capitalist? No, not capitalist, socialist or communist. That's what the West describes. But China is the world's second largest economy, in quotes again. Even if they are the first, there's going to be a manipulation to make sure the information is not out. Just make sure the US is always in front, for the game of capitalism and all that. But you see, they are the second largest economy in the world. And within the last 10 years, China removed 400 million people out of poverty. That's a system that's been criticized generally in the world. That I could say that. Now, if you look at the United States, that's the world's largest economy. That's capitalist. And you see, they are succeeding because they have the right institutions to back it up. China is succeeding because they have the right institutions to back it up. A nation like, should I say a nation like India, look at a nation like India. India is mainly mixed. And you see that there's a high level of poverty in India. And, there's a level of, where people are really doing well in India, and their system is highly socialist. So I think systems succeed based on the institutions they put in place to back them up, and not necessarily the systems themselves, the institutions they put in place to back them up, based on the realities of the people.
So you said two things. You said, first of all, we need to fix the problem of leadership in Africa. And also, we don't need a one-size-fits-all approach to these things. Each country should understand its uniqueness and develop something that caters to that. And from there, it doesn't matter if it is socialist or capitalist, as long as it works, at least based on the unique attributes of the people of that country, it's going to work. Now, but let me play the devil's advocate though. Some people will tell you that based on numbers, right, capitalism is still the best system of government. Now, you made reference to China being a communist system, and yet China is the second largest economy in the world. They would argue with you that under Chairman Mao, China was nothing to write home about. It was when China began to adopt a more capitalistic approach, China began to make waves. Of course, I would agree with you that based on the Chinese system, everything is regulated in China. Everything is regulated in China. But even so, if China were truly a communist system, China would not be producing the likes of Jack Ma, the owner of Alibaba, AliExpress. There are lots and lots of billionaires in China. There are lots and lots of unicorns in China. So if China were truly a communist system in the classical sense of the word, then we wouldn't have all these things. It was when they began to take a more capitalistic approach, they began to develop the economy, lift people out of poverty, and what have you. But I would give it to you that China is heavily regulated, heavily. I mean, look at what they did to Jack Ma. Jack Ma, we don't even know what's up with Jack Ma today. So the Chinese system is that crazy. I mean, that's what the debate on TikTok is all about. There are fears that TikTok, being a Chinese company, has to answer to the Chinese government if the Chinese government asks for anything. So those are real concerns I would give you. But then, based on numbers, based on history, based on what we can see today, they would argue with you that capitalism is still the most preferred system of government for any country to adopt. What do you say to that?
Okay. Now, I just want to make this point clear. The general ideology that China started growing when it adopted a capitalist system, it's shall I say, it's not correct. China started growing when it adopted a globalized system, not a capitalist system, because China was kind of focusing on its tradition and adopted the principle of isolationism, similar to what North Korea is doing right now.
Yeah.
But they decided to open their economy, not that they accepted a capitalist system, no. They decided to open their economy to the world, to expand their trade, especially through the Belt and Road Initiative. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah.
So that was the idea of the expansion. They decided to adopt a global model to think about the world and not just being traditionalist. Okay, so China still maintains its tradition, but they are trying to relate with the world on a globalized model, on a globalized form. So expanding forms of international trade, expanding new forms of partnerships and all that. Going around the world and doing things. That's a system China adopted, not that they adopted a capitalist system, because everything in China is like still regulated, even up to social media. It's still regulated.
Yeah.
I mean, and as I hear, I've been following the news lately. They want to make it in a way that China has its own internet. Not just social media, internet. It means what we see on our own internet will be different from what people see in China. That's just an example. So China is highly regulated, as you say, and the idea that that capitalism has worked for a lot of nations. I think yes, it has worked for a lot of nations, but considering the realities of the people of that nation. Now let me come to Africa, because we're in Africa. Just post-independence area, a lot of African nations adopted socialism and even communism. Shall I say that? Mandela himself in South Africa, he adopted the principle of socialism, although he said he never wanted labels. And our economies were doing pretty fine. In Cameroon, I would like to state that example. Cameroon was one of the fastest, I think the third in Africa, fastest growing economies in Africa, just post-independence. And our president at that time was Amadu Ahijo, highly socialist. If you want to call it, he should be communist. I mean, because the economy was a lot more regulated within this era than now. And we had Cameroon Airlines, which was functioning with Boeing 747 planes. I'm telling you, the salaries of government employees was twice what it is now. Twice what it is now. Everything was down. Everything, fuel prices were down. Life was quite easy in the days of Ahijo. Though everything was quite authoritative under his regime and all that. Now, when President Biya came to power in 1982, 1984, he wanted to adopt an open system. He wanted to be more capitalist. But there was one thing that set in. That it is reported that the Cameroon economy fell because of two reasons: fall in the prices of export products. That's one, like cocoa and coffee, like major things that make up the Cameroon economy. And the second was mismanagement. I want us to talk on that second topic, mismanagement. Why? Because they were trying to implement a system in which we had not institutions to back them for. So a lot of economic mismanagement came in under this free system. The Cameroon economy fell, and up to now we still like, shall I say, if you want to talk about the Cameroon economy in the world, we should be number 135. We should be number 135. Cameroon is not doing well in anything right now. I should say that, though we are the largest economy in CEMAC, but compared to Africa, we are nothing. We are still just struggling with a lot of things, because this notion of a free capitalist system came in, and we didn't have the institutions to back them up. And so high economic mismanagement set in, and it brought us to where we are. So I want to say that capitalism works. Yeah, it works. But when there are institutions to back them up, when there are strong institutions to back them up, yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Okay, so let me say this. The problem with socialism or communism is it has proximity with dictatorship. The reason is simple. For you to enforce something as simple as you regulating the prices of goods and commodities, it usually takes a bit of a tyranny for you to do that, as against letting the forces of supply and demand to determine the prices of these goods and commodities. But when government has to step in to do that, it usually takes force and tyranny for you to enforce that. And so it is no wonder why a country like China, we just talked about China now, China is very regulated. There is no free speech in China. You don't have your personal freedoms. Look at how they treated Chinese citizens during COVID lockdown, you know? So you don't have your freedoms. You don't have your civil liberties under a typical socialist or communist regime. And that is not congruent with the principles of democracy. And so those are the real issues with socialism. Now, in theory, yes, it's okay when prices of goods and commodities are regulated in such a way that the average citizen will be able to afford them. But in the long run, does that always work though? Because when you regulate prices of goods and commodities, apart from the flagrant disregard of human rights that usually occurs in a socialist regime, also it hampers economic growth of the private sector. As an investor, I won't be able to invest in such an economy. I won't be easy doing that because I know the government can always come in at any point in time, regulate whatever it wants to regulate, and I may not be able to maximize my profits. And also, it's usually okay when private sectors do their thing. The more money they make, the more employees they're able to employ, right? The more a business grows, the more people that business employs. But when the government regulates, when the government serves as a regulator, businesses won't be able to maximize their profit. Hence, they won't be able to employ more people, which in turn contributes more to the economy. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure. I want to agree with you on that point. If you want to talk about capitalism and human rights and freedom, yeah, I think you have to say capitalism really fits that view. Okay, capitalism really fits the view. Now, I want to quote a guy like President Reagan. Reagan, he said, when his greatest fear is that governments become too powerful, in a way that they have to regulate the freedoms of their people. Now, in a way, people give up their freedom for their security, and that's what should I say communism and socialism brings. No, mostly communism, by the way. The government has to come in to regulate a lot of things, to make sure you have enough food to eat, to make sure you're wealthy, and at least you have a minimum income. But on the other hand, they take away your freedom, in which you have to show complete loyalty to the government. It's not the best way to go. It's not the best way to go. But I think socialism can be just. Okay, if there is a system like that which cares about the welfare of people, but it is just, in which it doesn't use the power to constrain them, to constrain their freedoms and their rights. I think that is what I would call just. Now, let me come again now to the issue of capitalism. There is what they call the idolatry of capitalism, in which we have a system in which the resources are in the hands of a few people, a few powerful people, and what they do is they tend to exploit the masses. I will say this again. Obama calls it the trickle-down economy. So what he said about trickle-down economics is you can't continue to empower a few people and expect that their wealth is going to trickle down to those beneath them. You have to empower people on the grassroots to be able to rise and live their dreams and their expectations. That's one injustice with capitalism. That's one injustice with capitalism. And people often make the mistake to think that the GDP of a country, determines the wealth of the general population. Is wrong. You can't judge, you can't say people are living well based on the number of billionaires you have in your country. No, that's wrong. So that's what they call the idolatry of capitalism. And capitalism too can be made just if the system empowers people from the grassroots. Not just leaving them. When somebody is wealthy, when somebody is wealthy, and they have a free system in front of them, it is difficult for those beneath them to rise, because the rich keep getting richer. If you hear about the rich keep getting richer, it's under the capitalist system. I hope you understand that. But it can be made in a way when it's just, when it empowers those on the grassroots. So that's what I want to say.
Right. So to your point, I do agree with you that capitalism can be just as bad as socialism. Now, but I can't remember where I saw this quote. It says socialism does not work because human beings love to own property. And because of that exact reason, that is why socialist regimes tend to use force and tyranny, to implement their policies. It is ingrained in us to want to own property. And so now imagine you telling me that I can't own as much as I want to, or you are trying to place a cap on the amount of money I can earn or the amount of property I could buy. The government, that type of government would need to be tyrannical, to enforce those regulations. I am pro-capitalism and I'm pro-free markets, but I'll tell you that capitalism hasn't worked in Africa for many reasons. I actually just did a short YouTube video yesterday about this, but let me just recount what I said. To me, I think the reason capitalism hasn't worked in Africa is because Africa is over-regulated. The typical African country has, a plethora of regulations that do not allow for private enterprise to thrive. If you want to do very simple things, very basic things, usually it involves a whole lot of red tape. You have to go from one office to another office, from one office to another office. And in doing that, it slows down the process. And most times, if you want to fast track your own process, you have to bribe some people, and that only caters to the rich and wealthy. So for a young entrepreneur, let's say like me, if I want to do those things and I don't have the money to bribe somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, I'll be stuck. Whereas the person who has enormous amount of money can game the system, So I think overregulation is a bane to the growth of capitalism in Africa. Another reason would be cronyism. Most African countries, if you think about it, for most African countries, there is this alliance between the business class and the political class. Usually, the business class tend to be the relatives or the friends or the cronies of the political class. And based on that alliance, they tend to have contracts, they get to have concessions from the government that the average citizen cannot get. So I think, and also you earlier in the show, you talked about the lack of institutions. Most African countries just don't have credible, strong institutions that would allow for the thriving of the private sector, that will allow for the thriving of capitalism. So I think it's a complicated issue as regards why capitalism hasn't worked in Africa. But regardless, I am pro capitalism and pro free market, and I would hope that Africa can work on these limitations and allow for the thriving of the private sector.
Let me just cap in there for a while. I really want to agree on your points, and I just want to say that the reason why we have a lot of regulations in Africa, it's and the reason why capitalism is not really working the way we think it should work, like Tony and Omelo describes as Afri-capitalism, it's a political reason. You know why? Power conservation.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of governments that are implementing most of these regulations so as to keep the population under the control, so they don't lose power to some certain people. So they don't lose the power to some certain people. And in that way, they are always in charge. And they make sure they stay into power as long as they can. So I think the failure of capitalism in Africa has to do with, a political decision too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. Now, let me try to still man a case for socialism. Like I said, I'm pro-capitalism, but if I were to make a case for socialism, I would use the example of Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara is one of the best African leaders we've had in the past 60 years. But Thomas Sankara was a socialist, in terms of his records in public health, in terms of his record in education, women's rights, and what have you. He did so well that I don't think there is any modern African leader that can actually match his records, but he was a socialist. As a matter of fact, his heroes were Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. He was actually named the African Che Guevara, but he did so well during his short tenure. So, but what am I to say that what am I to reduce the impact he had in his country simply because he was a socialist? You understand? But again, I did say earlier that socialism has a proximity with dictatorship and tyranny, just like every other socialist leader you can think of. He was also a dictator. So these are just some of the nuances, some of the issues I have with the socialism and capitalism debate. But I would agree with you that capitalism can be as bad as socialism if not well managed, and we can already see that in Africa with cronyism, with corruption and what have you. So, it's a very complex issue, complex argument, if you ask me. Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Okay. I just want to say to add a word to what you were saying about Thomas Sankara and most of the post-independence leaders in Africa. Most of them were socialists.
Definitely, yeah.
You want to talk about Gaddafi? I think under Gaddafi, Libya was doing well, but he was a dictator. It always comes with that vice. But as I said, the system can be made just if the government doesn't use their power to impede on the freedoms of the people. Now, there was this general idea in Africa, what they call Ubuntuism. I don't know if you know about that. It's highly socialist in nature.
Yeah.
Highly socialist in nature because it considers, resources being owned and managed by the community rather than single individuals. And even Christianity, Christianity is highly socialist. I should say that Christianity is highly socialist. And it's an irony that even those in America who talk about evangelical Christianity are opposed to socialism. It's an irony, right? Those who talk about evangelical Christianity in the US are opposed to socialism and all that. But I think I want to give this conclusion. The world, the Chinese president said, a single flower does not make spring. Okay, a single flower does not make spring. The world is pretty diverse, and we have our own civilizations, our own cultures, our own realities. And I think we should learn to share this world the way it is. Where capitalism works, where communism works, where socialism works, and whatever system works. So long as the people are fine, so long as they have their basic freedoms, and so long as their rights are respected, I think it's just for me. We should not focus on the fact of labels and get too political, because that's what the whole debate is about. That's what this whole debate is about. If you talk about, why the Chinese were or the Russians would reject capitalism? Because they know it's American. And they think capitalism, introducing capitalism in China or in a country like US is simply bringing American culture to them, which will cancel out theirs. And just as communism, the American war on communism is just the same idea. The Americans don't want communism to come to their borders, to their shores, just because it is a Chinese ideology, just because it's a Russian ideology. Because if you have to implement communism in the United States, it means you're canceling out American culture totally, and that is what they don't want to accept. So it's not even becoming like something they want to adjust. An economic system is becoming highly political, which it's turned out to be a competition and a play between powers. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So Chinese don't want to hear about capitalism because it's American, not because it works or it doesn't work, just because it's American. I hope you understand. The same with the Russians. And the Americans don't want communism, not because it works or it doesn't work. It is because it is Chinese. And so if it gets in America, it cancels out American culture. So, these systems have become a cultural war in which it is trying to, it has become now a play of power between superpowers. And that's the problem we are facing. That's the problem we are facing right now. And so nations, nations like in Africa, when they try to adopt their own systems, the West now tries to measure and say, no, you're leaning to the left, you're leaning to the right, no, you're leaning to the east, you're leaning to the west, and so you're not right, and this is not right. They see the expansion of socialism and communism in Africa as the expansion of Chinese influence in Africa. I hope you understand.
Yeah.
And the Chinese in turn see the expansion of capitalism in Africa as the expansion of American influence in Africa. So that's it. It's just become a play of power, and it's not making the system work in any way. So as I said, it only works when it's just, when the rights of people are expected, they have the freedoms, and they are able to bring out their individuality.
Yeah. So to your point about Ubuntu, it reminds me of my first year in uni. We did something on African philosophy, and we studied Julius Nyerere. Julius Nyerere postulated Ujamaa, the philosophy of Ujamaa. Now, at its core, Ujamaa is also very socialist, very, very socialist. So I can understand why a lot of post-independence African leaders adopted some version of Marxism or socialism. It appealed to them. At that time, the West was known for colonialism, was known for the racism, and all that. And so the East, that is socialism, communism, appealed to them. They wanted something different. Adopting any ideology from the West would be more like committing sacrilege, So I can understand why it appeals to them. But some people might argue with you that the adoption of socialism set Africa back by many decades. But that's a matter of debate anyways. All right. Destiny, how can people find you? Maybe your foundation or something. If people want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Okay. You want to connect with my foundation, you can send me an email on afufoundation1@outlook.com. Afu is AFU, and then foundation as it is at Outlook, afufoundation1@outlook.com. Or you can get to Facebook page. My Facebook page name is Destiny Afu. For the foundation name is Afu Foundation. Just as simple as that. We're just on Facebook and Twitter. I'm just getting Twitter for now, so but we are more active on Facebook. And if you want to call me, I think I should give out my number. Is that okay?
Why not? Why not?
Okay. If you want to call me, you'll have to put the country code 237-675-374051. So that's my number to reach me. And I'm open to any collaboration in aspects of governance, leadership, international relations, international development, and anything that benefits humanity socially. So thank you a lot for having me today, Luke. Thank you a lot. I really love the program, though we had the network hitches, but it was good.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It was a very interesting conversation with you, and hopefully we'll have more conversations in the future. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. Later.
Right, bye-bye. Have a nice day, man.
You too.